What happens when a lone black man fights a corporate giant built on lies and silence? You won't believe how his truth tore through the walls of power and flipped the whole company upside down. Jason Clark was never the kind of man to just walk toward a problem. No, he grabbed it by the throat and put it in its place. The evening in the towering Manhattan corporate office started like any other, the constant hum of the air conditioners fighting the city's relentless heat, the clatter of keyboards echoing down sterile hallways, and the faint smell of cheap coffee, the kind that never quite kicks in, but somehow manages to linger, reminding you why you're still here. Yet Jason wasn't about to pack up and call it a day. Not when he'd been patiently helping a new hire untangle glitches in the company's labyrinthine reporting system for nearly an hour. Quiet, steady, no grandstanding, because he knew the value of passing on knowledge, especially when you're one of the few who actually cares enough to work. Right then, while he was showing how to properly configure the system, a white guy from the next department, the kind of face that looks like he just bit into a rubber band instead of a steak, let out a loud, derisive snort and said loud enough for half the floor to hear, "Oh, of course, Jason's here to save the day. He's our corporate diversity poster boy. Big thanks to the marketing folks for the quotas." His eyes cut sharp and cold, like Jason didn't even deserve the respect others had earned by sweat and grind. Jason clenched his jaw, silently cursing this game, a game where he was always just a pawn on someone else's chessboard. He took a deep breath, feeling a familiar surge of anger mixed with that heavy helplessness only the overlooked know too well. All right, he thought, time to remind them who really deserves respect around here. The corporate skyscraper, all mirrored glass and cold steel, felt like a concrete jungle where every corner hid prejudice sharper than a jungle cat's claw. The buzz of voices, mixed with the irritated tapping of keyboards and squeaking office chairs, formed a constant backdrop. Here in this gray maze, Jason was more than an employee. He was a rare voice trying to wake the sleeping masses. He prepped himself for the next meeting where he would lay out his proposals to overhaul the department's processes. Simple but brilliant plans, ones that could save the company millions and boost efficiency. But simple didn't mean they'd be welcomed with open arms. The conference room was drenched in the fake politeness corporate America perfected. White walls reflected fluorescent light with surgical precision, and cheap faux leather chairs awaited the usual parade of suits. Smiles stretched tight but eyes sharper than knives, throwing daggers of thinly veiled insults. The department head, the same manager who loved reminding Jason about his corporate quota status, spoke with an unmistakable tone of condescension. "Well, Mr. Clark, your data is impressive for someone at your level. We'll see how it fits into the current structure." Jason's mouth went dry. He knew "we'll see" was corporate code for "we're tossing this in the trash." He'd faced this script 1,000 times, but each time it simmered his blood anew. Holding back the urge to snap, he responded with a controlled edge of irony. "Thanks for the confidence. Hopefully the data will speak for itself, regardless of my levels." Laughter broke out in the room, harsh, at times cruelly cynical. A few co-workers exchanged looks, clearly entertained by what they saw as his little performance. To them, Jason was the outsider, the man who not only didn't fit the mold, but annoyed everyone with his talent and, well, his skin color. After the meeting, one colleague approached, his eyes saying loud and clear, "You know your place. It's on the sidelines, not center stage." "Hey, Jason, don't sweat it," he said with fake concern. "This is corporate politics. You're no stranger to these waters, right?" Jason smiled, but it wasn't warm. It was the kind of smile you give when you're handed a cup of hot tea, but it's actually boiling oil. "Politics? No, brother," he said low, voice laced with dry fire. "This is daily soul poisoning." Inside, the battle raged. On one side, a genuine desire to work, to contribute, to succeed honestly. On the other, endless walls of misunderstanding, racism, and barely disguised hostility. Those walls grew taller by the day, suffocating any hope. One afternoon, Jason did something simple, something kind. He helped an elderly janitor carry heavy boxes of paper to the elevator. Next thing he knew, a young manager with a sneer whispered just loud enough, "See? This is your job, Clark. Carrying boxes. Don't get in the way of real business. Jason stopped, felt the heat rise in his chest, and muttered to himself, if they think I'm just their errand boy, they're in for a rude awakening. Things quickly spiraled. His reports were ignored, his ideas sabotaged. In meetings with upper management, he felt invisible, words lost in the air like smoke. Yet he kept speaking, speaking out against the injustice, calling out the corporate diversity policy for what it really was, a shiny facade masking deep-seated racism. Funny how loud everyone yells about tolerance until it's your turn to be heard, he thought, staring at the wall lined with photos of so-called successful top execs. A sea of sameness in expensive suits, smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. Jason remembered his mother's lessons. A woman who'd battled prejudice, climbing the ranks in City Hall's finance department. And his father's wisdom. Son, the world's a chessboard. It ain't always the strongest who wins, but the smartest. Now he knew he had to be both. But something inside refused to let go. This fight wasn't just for him. It was for all those before him and all who'd come after. The ones tired of silent suffering, tired of injustice ignored. Then came the blow. The day after his latest report, Jason was summoned to HR. There sat a man who seemed to carry the bitterness and cynicism of the entire system in his cold stare. A middle-aged white man with the corporate smirk of, I hold your fate. Mr. Clark, he began, voice icy polite, there have been several complaints about your unprofessional tone and violations of corporate ethics. You must understand, further incidents could have serious consequences. Jason smirked quietly. The complaints came from those jealous of his success, afraid of change. Outwardly, he stayed calm. Thank you for the warning, he replied evenly. I'm always open to constructive criticism, but if constructive means silence and obedience, that's a problem. For the company. Walking out, his heart pounded like a drumline. His mind raced. They want me quiet, but I didn't come here to be a shadow. Office eyes flicked his way, some sympathetic, some fearful to show it, others chuckling at the loudmouth in the corporate swamp. But for Jason, that moment was the line in the sand. That night in his small apartment, he called his mother. Mom, he said, voice tight, I thought I could change things here, but they won't even change their minds about people like me. Her voice cracked with pain and pride. Son, sometimes you gotta break the old world before building the new one. Jason felt a new power growing inside, one that would soon spill out and force these corporate giants to see the truth. What happened next changed everything. You don't want to miss how it all unfolded. Jason Clark was just beginning to realize that his fight wasn't merely a drawn-out battle with incompetence and bias. It was a full-blown storm, and now that storm was swallowing him whole. After that warning from HR, the pressure hit like a freight train, weighing on his shoulders like a mountain that made every breath feel heavy and forced. But backing down, that wasn't in his vocabulary. The very next day after the so-called talk, Jason's office became a hotspot for unofficial watchers. Co-workers who started shadowing his every move like guards in a fortress. One of them, a young guy with envy and confusion plastered all over his face, didn't even bother to whisper as he leaned in close and hissed, You do realize if you keep pushing like this, they're going to show you the door. Rules here are tougher than any street fight. Jason smiled, and not the kind of smile you flash to make friends. This was the kind that said, Go ahead, try me. He'd seen those rules in action. He'd watched how they crushed others. Ruthless, efficient, like a well-oiled machine designed to protect the status quo. But Jason knew this system wouldn't break him. No, he was going to break the system. That same day, sabotage kicked into high gear. The ideas he once shared as innovations magically vanished from meeting minutes. His reports disappeared from inboxes. Presentations he'd spent hours crafting got pushed to the bottom of agendas, or canned outright. Management ignored him in meetings, while his own team stopped sending him the most basic reports. Whispers floated through the hallways. Some called Jason clumsy, others branded him a troublemaker without cause. Wrapped in corporate humor, Those jabs cut deeper than most outsiders would guess. One afternoon, sitting alone in the cramped kitchenette of his office, Jason cracked open his laptop and typed out a thought. If this was a TV show, they'd cancel it already for low ratings. He stared at his reflection in the screen. A man fighting for justice in a world where justice was just another buzzword in PowerPoints. A week later, tension reached its boiling point. At another department meeting, when Jason tried again to drive home his ideas, an older manager, one who never hid his dislike, cut him off with a sneer. Maybe it's time to stop rolling out these breakthrough ideas. We're here to work, not put on a show. If you want real work, just do what you're told. The room buzzed with murmurs. Eyes locked onto Jason, waiting to see how he'd react. He clenched his fists under the table. Then, with cold resolve, fired back. Work isn't just following orders. Work is doing what's right. And what's right is building a company that respects every employee, not kicking people out just because of their skin color. Silence felt like a heavy curtain. Some felt uneasy, others quietly cheered. But the most important thing? Jason refused to let his voice be drowned out. Outwardly, it looked like the noose was tightening, but inside he gathered strength, like a storm-building power drop by drop before the lightning strikes. He became more careful, started collecting evidence. Emails, voice recordings, blatant examples of unfair treatment. His family and friends stood by him. His mother's warm voice reminded him, "Don't forget, son, truth is your sharpest weapon." His brother, a community activist, offered advice on how to use media to shine light on the problem. Day by day, the situation worsened. He was forced to stay late, doing other people's work without overtime or thanks. He overheard co-workers openly debating who was capable of more and who was just a token prop. His sarcasm and dark humor became his shield. Yeah, I'm the shining example of diversity, he thought bitterly. If I was white, they'd be rolling out the red carpet. But guess talent and color don't mix around here. During a chat with a colleague, he couldn't resist. If you want, I could host a seminar on how to ignore great ideas without noticing. Seems like the hottest topic in our office. The colleague chuckled quietly, but worry flickered in his eyes. Many knew this wasn't just office drama anymore. Jason felt it was time to raise the stakes. His move was bold and direct. Bring the company's dirty laundry into the spotlight. He began using social media and media contacts, sharing stories, documents, and proof. It was a risk, but he had no other choice. Within weeks, his story went viral. Panic erupted inside the company. The board called an emergency meeting. Jason felt his voice wasn't just an echo in the halls anymore. It was a thunderclap no one could ignore. But the fight wasn't over. Pressure ramped up. Hints about possible firing, distancing by co-workers, and restricted access to crucial resources. One evening, as he stood in front of a mirror at home, he saw a tired but unbreakable man staring back. His eyes burned with determination. They want to break me, he thought, but breaking me is like trying to snap an iron pillar with bare hands. This is the climax. Everything you've been waiting for is right here. Stay tuned to see how the hero puts them all in their place. Jason Clark was standing at the edge, the weight of endless injustice pressing down so hard it felt like the walls themselves were closing in. But just when it seemed like the fight might finally break him, Jason did something no one in that glass tower expected. He made a move that cracked the sky like thunder over a clear afternoon. A move that forced the whole corporation to rethink their game, to finally understand that real power isn't about titles or connections, it's about truth. It all started with the mountain of evidence Jason had quietly been gathering. Every detail, every email, every recording, every word that proved this wasn't just systemic discrimination, it was a deep rot covered up and protected by the very people at the top. His file was thicker than some books on the shelves. Audio clips where his ideas were outright sabotaged, emails dripping with snide remarks and thinly veiled insults, videos showing senior managers dismissing his work and his worth with contempt. Jason knew internal battles weren't enough anymore. It was time to bring the dirt into the daylight. So he reached out, independent journalists hungry for the real story, activists with a pulse on change, and influencers who could spread the word far and wide on social media. His story, that of a black man not only fighting racism in a corporate giant, but pulling back the curtain on its hypocrisy and lies, hit a nerve. "You thought this was just corporate politics," he said in one interview. "No, it's a war for respect and dignity, so your kids can walk into work without fear of being swallowed alive." Those words hit millions like a hammer, his name and story exploding across feeds, hashtags blazing in solidarity. Inside the company, panic spread fast. Shareholders demanded answers, accountability, action. The boardroom was called to an emergency session, and this time, the usual smiles and scripted niceties were gone, replaced by cold, tense silence. They finally got it. This was not just one employee's problem. This was about reputation, trust, survival. Meanwhile, the pressure on Jason ratcheted up to a new level. Attempts to sideline him from key projects, veiled threats about his job, bribes to quiet him, even baseless disciplinary probes. But instead of backing down, Jason stood firm, like a rock refusing to erode. Then came the moment of truth. At a company-wide meeting, with every employee and manager present, Jason delivered a speech no one saw coming. He didn't just lay out the truth, he laid down a blueprint. New equality policies, support and training programs, the creation of an internal committee to tackle discrimination, and mandatory transparency in hiring and promotions. "You can keep burying your heads in the sand," he told them, "but truth always surfaces. And if we want to be a real company, we must learn to respect each other, value diversity, and take responsibility." His words ignited an emotional explosion. Some rose to applaud, others sat stunned, unsure how to respond. The silence afterward was so thick, you could hear a pin drop. The company started making changes. Key managers known for enabling racism and injustice were replaced. Mentorship programs sprang up to support underrepresented employees. Corporate training stopped being lip service and turned into real conversations, tackling real problems, not just rehearsed lines. Jason was appointed head of the new Equity and Inclusion Department. This wasn't just a title, it was a symbol that change was possible. And though the road ahead was long and full of hurdles, for the first time in a long time, Jason felt he wasn't alone. His family and friends beamed with pride. His mother, tears in her eyes, said, "You did more than stand tall. You changed the rules of the game." His brother, shrugging, added, "That's a true fighter. Not the one who quits, but the one who breaks the system." Looking in the mirror, Jason didn't just see a man who'd fought injustice. He saw a voice for those who'd been silent for too long. That was his real victory. Jason Clark's story became inspiration, not just for his company, but for anyone facing racism and discrimination. His fight proved that even in the biggest, toughest systems, the power of truth and courage can bring real change. He knew one thing for sure. The fight goes on, but now it's armed with a new weapon: openness, honesty, and an unshakable faith in justice.